welcome Ms. Indra Nooyi, and welcome to all the 900 or so people who are Zooming with us. It is a great day for us, not just because of July 5, our Founders Day. It is a Guru Purnima. Guru Purnima is essentially complete uh, full moon with the Guru in mind. In an educational edifice like this, Guru Purnima is the most important thing. And I am so glad we are having this particular day where one of the best and most well-known, amazing CEO, regardless of the gender, who is actually now in the helm of the whole affairs and of Pepsi as chairman and at the same time CEO for a significant period of 2006 to 2019. And she also faced, believe it or not, the 2008, where there is an economic meltdown, as we are facing this COVID. Uncertainties are inevitable, but worrying is optional. Definitely panicking is pathetic and planning is paramount. So I want you to stay positive. Yes, we have this COVID. So what? There are so many things were there and nothing is going to stop us. Stay positive, be positive. And I can guarantee you one thing. You may say, hey, if I am positive, am I going to be successful? I cannot guarantee that. By being positive, I cannot guarantee that you will be successful. But what I can guarantee is if you are negative and have a bad attitude, that is certainty of failure. That I can guarantee. Do you want a failure or a possibility of a success? So be positive. How do you become positive? First of all, you have to increase your bandwidth. Believe it or not, a lot of things we cannot see because our eyesight has clearly designed by God to a particular level. We cannot see infrared rays, we cannot see ultraviolet rays, but it exists. Similarly, even our own ears have some decibels. A microscope, ordinary microscope, can see some organism, whereas an electron microscope can do that. So can we increase the bandwidth while you are here, by which you can expand your horizon, expand your vision, expand your ear's power, and that is by 4E, like the 4P. First of all, you got to have a tremendous amount of energy, and at the same time experience what we are going to do in the course of this 1 year or 2 years, as the case may be. And that, with your energy, if you have both education and employability, and these two will take you a long way. I am positive you should take the best work. And you may say, if you want to have success, definitely work. There are only one time the success comes before work, and that is only in the dictionary. All right. So otherwise, you have to have a smart work, tremendous amount of work. Enjoy every minute of yours. Aspire to inspire before you aspire. Get the whole thing done and take the toughest job. That's what Indra Nooyi has done. If to serve God, Lord Ram, you can be a Hanuman, and it is a single distinct object. Or you can be a millions of squirrels and one of them. What is your choice? Take the Hanuman's role. Even if you fail, you are going to succeed. So folks, let us not talk too much on this stuff. We all want to listen to Indra Nooyi and her experiences, and therefore we will talk about that thing, and I will come back to you later on. I would like to, with my whole heart, on behalf of the entire family of mine, where my wife, my children, and even my granddaughter, actually my granddaughter by name Abhirami, has Indra Nooyi's photograph in her room, and not anybody else. Only a 12-year-old kid. So here is a role model all of you want to see from her experiences. Let me not take any more of your time. Thank you very much. Wish you the very best of this Guru Purnima, so that it augurs so well for what you are planning to do here at Great Lakes. And welcome to Great Lakes. Indra, welcome to this place, and welcome all. Thank you very much. God bless you all. Jai Hind and Jai Great Lakes.
Thanks, Bala. Fatima, do you want me to get started? What do you want me to do?
Fatima is
Yes,
going
I
to put a
thank you.
little video.
Yes, we have a small video. So before I go ahead to do that, moving on to the next segment of the day's events, I'm proud to present to you the Successful Women in Management Initiative. SWIM, SWIM, is a brainchild of Professor Bala's, conceived in 2005, completely focused on women and their roles, contributions to organizational and societal well-being. Basically, to give you a brief idea, SWIM was conceived in order to identify and promote more women to take up managerial and leadership positions in organizations, in the business and non-business context. So the initiative sprouted because of the basic conviction that women are underrepresented in these positions. Moreover, there is also the belief that the presence of a larger proportion of women in these kinds of positions will enable organizations to conduct themselves effectively, ethically, and as socially conscious entities. So SWIM initiative is really a platform for prominent women, leaders across various fields and generations to share views and ideas on what the playing field looks like, what the challenges are, how they've overcome them, their own stories of successes and failures even, and how they have coped, what it takes to be at the top of their game. So today's speaker is one such reigning queen of the corporate kingdom. She not only represents the success women can achieve in such endeavors, but also serves as a role model to many want-to-be business women leaders in this society. So I request Sri Ramaswamy to play a short video of introduction. It's basically a collage, ma'am, photo collage of yourself in various positions. And after that, you may start with your address.
Perhaps you can show that after I finish my speech so that we can
Fair
make sure
enough.
that
it's good enough.
I cover my remarks because I have to leave at 10:05 to make another speech, okay?
Perfect, madam.
Let me,
we'll just start.
first of all, wish Professor
let me
Bala a very happy birthday.
Indra, can I introduce you now that I will introduce you just for a few minutes.
Okay.
All right. You know that this technology always has our own problems. That's why human beings are there. Anyway, I would like to just give a personal account of myself with Indra Nooyi. I know her from her Motorola days. She was in Chicago area. The very first time I invited her for a big conference was in the year 2002, sometime like May 10th, if she remembers, at Kellogg. And unfortunately, just before that, about 10 days before, I had to go through a quintuple bypass surgery. And my voice was completely gone because there was a double problem. So I had this problem. But she came there. I could not even speak, but I could stand up and show her face. And from that time on, her support to me in particular, to Kellogg in general, and now to Great Lakes together is amazing. All of you know from her background that she was there as the chairman and CEO from the year 2006 to 2019. And at that time, the net revenue increased by 80%, the shareholder return increased by 162%, and the total turnover was from 2.7 billion to 6.5. Tremendous amount of awards, more than 11 honorary doctorates, and experience at many places, including BCG, Motorola, ABB, and others. But her notable contribution, where every paper, whether it is Fortune or Forbes or Newsweek, have shown as the best woman. I don't worry about this best woman or best man, etc. But what is very important is her performance with purpose, her thinking that passion is important, but passion with compassion is more important. Abilities are more important, but abilities with humility are more important. Success is important. Success with integrity is important. And therefore, the planet, people, and of course, the profit are important. And so she went through what is good for the human being, what is good for the planet, and rather than just for the money or whatever it is. And she has given in the Kola War, who is the supreme. And I am positive you are listening, you are here to listen to her and not to me. So let me eliminate that video that we could not see. But with this, let me invite our dear friend, an advisory board member of Great Lakes and other places, including Amazon and whatnot, as board member. Let us have a very big warm welcome from the entire 900 plus people who are attending this particular vision. Thank you very much, Indra. God bless
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bala. And most importantly, a very happy birthday to you. I
Thank you
cannot
very much.
imagine you're 80 plus. I would have said somewhere in the 60s, but that's okay. I wish you many more years of a very happy, healthy future. So happy birthday to you. Thank you for inviting me to speak to all of you. I want to start with a little story from about 3 or 4 years ago, then link it back to what's happening today, and then talk about leading a life of purpose, especially as business school students. About 3 years ago, I got a letter from an entity which said, "Dear Mrs. Nooyi, we are the National Portrait Gallery in the United States, and we are planning to put your portrait in the portrait gallery. And please let us know if you're willing to interview the portrait artists. And there's no cost to you, nothing. This is a selection process. The committee has selected you." Now, I had not heard of a portrait gallery in the United States because, I didn't have time to visit museums or portrait galleries, so I didn't even know one existed. I thought it was a spoof letter. I get spoof letters all the time. So I wrote on it and sent it to my PR guy saying, "Another joke letter." I forgot it. A month later, the PR guy walked into my office and said, "Indra, this is not a joke letter. I called around and this is for real. The Smithsonian Museum in Washington, D.C. has something called the National Portrait Gallery, where they induct into the gallery portraits of people who've changed the face of America. So if there was a certain arc that the country was going in or business was going in, they shifted the arc. And those portraits are inducted into the National Portrait Gallery." So far, it was only musicians or politicians or Supreme Court justices. For the first time, they've started to induct a few business people. There's about 4 or 5 business people they've inducted into the gallery, and they want to put your portrait in. I said, "For what? What did I do? I ran PepsiCo, for crying out loud." They said, they want to put your portrait in because of, exactly as Professor Bala said, performance with purpose. This is the first time a CEO has talked about integrating performance, financial performance, with doing what's right for the people, the planet, and getting the product line in line with what society needs. It was a humbling experience. We went through the whole process of painting the portrait and inducting it into the gallery. It was a fantastic experience, but that was the first time that I actually felt performance with purpose was recognized and accepted. It had gone mainstream as opposed to all the critics I had about why should you make your products healthier? Why should you cut down your footprint? Why should you have less plastic? Why should you use less water? Just give me lots of money. So it was a inflection point in my entire discussion. So I want to pivot from that to talk about today. Bala talked about what we are facing today. I want to pivot to where we are today, and it's important that we pivot to where we are today because all that I went through in my time as CEO, whether the financial crisis or activist investors coming after me, what we're going through today, all of us, you, us, whether it's India, the United States, the whole world, is the story of COVID. And I want to touch on the story of COVID a little bit and then come to purpose, and why that's so important, and the role that all of you can play. I honestly believe that I never thought I would live to see what we are seeing today. A global pandemic, the likes of which none of us have ever seen. The last pandemic we had was the Spanish flu that was 102 years ago. It moved at a speed that none of us were unable to or unwilling to comprehend, and none of us were ready to respond to it. Majority of the countries reacted too slowly, and when the illness did arrive, it exposed not just the illness and the infection, it also exposed the ills that exist within our countries. All of us, all the failure points it exposed. Example, among the poorest that live in cramped conditions, the virus spread rapidly. And it didn't spare you whether you were in the US or Europe or India. It hit all the poor, the migrant workers. Among the oldest and the most vulnerable, least able to fight the virus, it did the greatest share of damage. Again, it didn't discriminate between ethnicities or anything else or gender. It hit the old. Weaknesses in our society were exposed, whether it's the medical system, the healthcare system, all of those began to buckle under immense strain. In fact, in some countries, a rudimentary system didn't even exist. The only option that existed was a lockdown. So we suppressed the virus, but all of us locking down. At every point in time over the last 8 to 10 weeks, 1/3 of the world was in complete lockdown. I've never seen something like that. For New York City, Mumbai, Delhi, Chennai to be in complete lockdown. I don't know about you, I almost was scared because it's an eerie feeling that unsettles you. It's nothing like what we've all experienced. Only now are we slowly coming out of the lockdown in many places. But this lockdown also showed that bankruptcies are, prevalent everywhere. Unemployment has gone up. But again, people in the low end of society are getting hit the most. And through this whole crisis, we may have had some strong leaders, but the political system didn't work the way it should. The political system didn't work the way it should. And in this moment of crisis, you would think that business rose up because the political system failed. Businesses should rise up. Some did. Some stood by their employees and their customers. Some lent their weight to this great collective effort, but many didn't. They laid off their employees. They delayed paying the smaller suppliers. And some even gouged their customers because they saw this as an opportunity to make a lot of money. Taken together, I think this is a crisis that's forcing all of us to sit down and say, what kind of a humanity do we want emerging from this crisis? What kind of capitalism? What kind of leaders? And as all of you leave the confines of Great Lakes School of Management, what kind of business people do you want to be as you go and serve not just your businesses, but the world? I'm talking about this because I had a front row seat to all this. I was the co-chair of Reopen Connecticut. So Connecticut was hard hit because it's the link between New York and Massachusetts. So the Metro North train that goes through Connecticut was also called the COVID train. So everybody who commuted between all of these cities just brought COVID. And so in the early days, we went on hard lockdown and the governor called me and said, hey, Indra, I want you to lead the task force to figure out how to reopen Connecticut. Today, Connecticut is 100% open. Our cases are the lowest in the country today. And now we're being held up as an example of a great state. But through this reopen process, I came to understand the magnitude of the crisis and all the supporting crises that we faced. And the balance we had to strike was the balance between physical and economic well-being, physical well-being versus economic well-being. How do you take these two dials and dial them? Should you let everybody go out in society and get herd immunity because you have to open business? Or should you say, hey, wait a minute, we don't want all the old people to perish. So let's think about this carefully. I also saw hospitals struggling, communities struggling. I saw owners of businesses who wanted to open. They needed to open, but they could not because they were afraid of the consequences. I saw millions of people walk that tightrope between lives and livelihoods. And like many others, I looked at all of this and said, how do we make sure this sort of situation does not happen again? If we have another pandemic, are we prepared for it? Are we any better prepared for it? I mean, there's already signs that the next pandemic is coming. How do we take lessons from this pandemic and fundamentally realign humanity, business, society, governments? How are we going to do that? So I'm going to talk about 6 observations and the role of corporations as a 7th. And I'm going to bring it all together and say, what's the message for you all? First, the one thing that became amply clear through this pandemic is that we need a government. Every country needs a government that can anticipate and then address the next crisis. What this pandemic showed us is there is almost no country in the world, bar maybe 1 or 2, that anticipated the crisis, or was mobilizing properly to address it. I'll give you a simple example. If you have a federal government that has 10 different departments that have to come together and they organize themselves, every state should have the same docking mechanism. So federal to state, this alignment. But nobody really thought like a business handling a complex project. So we had mass chaos in every country. I'm not just talking about the United States. The second big thing that has to change is that viruses know no borders. International communities have to cooperate and coordinate. You cannot retreat into nationalistic boundaries. Bits and bytes and viruses and molecules do not stay within country borders. Multilateral institutions need reform, but you can't walk away from them. You've got to engage with them. And all of those are big business issues. Third, if we don't address systematic inequality in our societies, today's systematic inequality is tomorrow's revolution. Let me be clear. Today's systematic inequality is tomorrow's revolution. If we don't realize that, be careful. We can only go so far in suppressing a big group of people and allowing a smaller and smaller group of people to make more and more money. It's time to address it. Fourth, we need to build a society that does not just protect its elders, it's also valuing its elders. You know, the older people have contributed so much to society. Many people said, hey, let's sacrifice them and let's open up the economies. Absolutely not. I think we need a society that protects and values its elders. Fifth, and I say this as somebody who ran PepsiCo, we need to rethink our society so that we are healthier and stronger. This crisis has showed that people with pre-existing conditions, comorbidities, really hurt the most. Obesity, diabetes, asthma, lung conditions, atrial fibrillation. You cannot cure when you're 60 and 70, you've got to prevent, which means we have to fundamentally rethink what people eat, how they live, how they exercise. Fundamental change. Sixth, we all discovered that healthcare systems failed. Many countries don't have insurance systems that protect their people. Hospitals just didn't have the capacity, and hospitals lost their humanity. Every time I read a story about people getting turned away from a hospital in India, it broke my heart. And so hospitals did not act like hospitals. Again, it talks about the soul of every institution. And finally, we need a private sector to play a much bigger role and stand shoulder to shoulder with government and society, both during a crisis and outside of one. Why am I saying this? I look at all the things that need to be fixed. Just as an example, coming out of the crisis. Testing. None of us have enough capacity for testing, low-cost testing with quick turnaround time. Right after this call, we have a call with about 10 scientists from India, 10 from the United States, about 5 from the UK. I'm trying to pull everybody together to say, let's come up with an inexpensive test with a quick turnaround time so we can test more people to prevent the outbreaks. We don't have a mechanism to even do something as simple as that. If we don't involve private enterprise, it won't happen. Zoom replacement. You know what I commend about India? Your Prime Minister said, we have got to get a replacement for Zoom, and GeoMeets comes about. If private enterprise doesn't lean in to do all of these rapid response mechanisms, it won't work. Improving schools. If you're going to go to online education, there's got to be a good online, offline, hybrid education. Governments cannot do this. If private enterprise doesn't lean in to get this done, it's not going to happen. I can go on and on. Hospitals, healthcare insurance. In every one of these cases, the time has come for private sector to lean in to improve society, to understand that their role in society is not just to generate more and more money so that their founders, their shareholders are worried more about level of returns, not duration of returns, which is really what we focused on, but to really think about, are they passing on costs to society? Has society changed that what was a luxury in the past is now a cost? I'll give you one. Why is a medical insurance company with a CEO that has to deliver quarterly profit increase? Isn't medical insurance a public good? Isn't a hospital a public good? Why do we believe hospitals should be private enterprises that improve profits every quarter? If they do, they can only do it one of 3 or 4 ways. Cut the service, increase the costs, only bring in healthy people in elective surgeries, and throw out everybody else. The degrees of freedom are limited. That is not a hospital. So I think this particular time, this incredible moment of stillness, coming out of this existential crisis that we've all been through, the time has come for all of us to think about what kind of a society do we want to be? Do we want to be narcissistic and selfish, or unselfish and with more humanity? What do we want to be? And that brings me full circle to all of you. You're all graduating from a great school, Great Lakes. Look at what Bala has done over the years. I think when you come out of schools like Great Lakes, the natural inclination is to go for the job that pays the highest salary. And then you sit there devising CDOs that might bring you a lot of money inside your organization, collateralized debt obligations. But they screw consumers downstream. But you don't think about that because in the short term, you and your company makes a lot of money. I want you to go to work saying, how are we going to address society's biggest issues? If I'm put on a project that I know is bad for society, okay, how do I change it? Now, some of you might look at me and say, hey, wait a second, you ran PepsiCo. Yep. I tell you what, I didn't invent Pepsi, somebody else did. What I did when I came in, I said, society has changed. There was a time when people liked to drink sugary drinks. Now obesity is high. And even though things like PepsiCo only account for 1.4% of the sugar intake, I don't care. I want to do my part. So what do? We diversified the offering, more zero-calorie products, but more importantly, we began to lower the sugar in core Pepsi. That doesn't happen overnight, because if we lowered it 50%, you won't drink it. Every time we lowered it just a bit to get your tongue used to a new taste. So each of us has to think about how can we act with purpose in our organizations so we do not pass costs on to society. I can imagine some of you saying, hey, but I'm junior. I need to pay off student loans. I have my sister's wedding to pay off. You know, I can think of all of the societal issues that go through your head. All of those are practical considerations. But let your conscience swing into force here, because the time has come for every business leader to stop and ask the tough questions. Don't just go out there and protest on the streets. Ask those tough questions in your families, in your places of work, in your friend groups. Are we doing the right thing for society? Because at the end of the day, my generation now are mere stewards of entities, because it's for you that the world exists. You are the next generation. And if you don't become the change you want to see, I think the future doesn't look so bright. On the other hand, if you start to practice the change you want to see, the world that you're going to create for yourself can be quite exciting. So that is the newest version of performance with purpose. Deliver performance, but balance, level, and duration of returns. Don't focus just on the level of returns and forget the duration. Because we want anything to sustain over a long period of time. It requires nurturing, it requires investment, and it requires that you don't just push the costs to somebody else. This is going to come back to bite you. So with that, let me close and say thank you again for asking me to speak to you. And with that, I'll take any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Nooyi. That was a brilliantly articulated yet succinct portrayal of the realities of the world we live in right now, the need of the hour, and for asking us to think of how to link performance and purpose. This chatbot has been pinging nonstop with questions from the students, so I'm going to request our Dr. Vidya Mahambare, Professor of Economics, to step in and pose those questions to you. Dr. Vidya, on to you.
Yeah, thank you, Ms. Indra Nooyi. That was a wonderful and very straightforward, direct talk. There are lots of questions. I will try to club together some of them related to what you have talked. You mentioned about purpose and the role of the organization. So one of the first questions which students have posed is, uh, how did you go about convincing your shareholders that what you are doing is right? Because it must have been very, very tough to convince them. And as you mentioned, even at a junior level, they can do it, but how did you go about it?
Yeah, that was perhaps the toughest thing because remember, this is 2020. When I started was 2006, and nobody at that time was talking about purpose. And here was this Indian-born CEO coming to run this iconic American company with iconic brands, and she's talking about changing everything. What the hell's going on? She's talking about water savings. Who cares about water? We have lots of water. She's talking about reducing plastic. Who cares? We just put in a landfill. You know, about people, she wants to treat people so they bring their whole selves to work. We give them a paycheck. That's all people are about. So had to change the narrative completely. If you just go out there and say, this is what I want to do, people reject you. So the way we did it was we framed everything we're doing future back and outside in. So we framed the big mega trends that were going to impact society over the next couple of decades. You know, there were hundreds of mega trends, but from those mega trends, we took out those that could impact our business directly. And then from those mega trends, we said, what should be the strategic directions from those mega trends? And what should be the operational plans? And how did they compare with what we're doing today? So anytime we went to a shareholder, the shareholder would say, why do you have to make your product portfolio healthier? I don't understand. Your job is to sell more sugary drinks, and my job is to collect the money. I look at the shareholder and say, look, instead of questioning what I'm doing, let's start with the mega trend. Do you think society is moving towards health and wellness? Oh, absolutely. Even I've changed my eating and drinking habits. That's what they would say. So society has changed its habits because they believe they have to go towards health and wellness. Don't I have to redo my portfolio for changing society? The interesting thing is, shareholders said something very funny. They said, you focus on sugary drinks. If we want to do health, we'll go buy another company's shares that focuses on health. True. However, if you don't grow a company, the company will atrophy. People will not come to you. People come to work for a company because it's got growth. Without growth, which is oxygen, you will not get the best and the brightest. So the option that the shareholder has was, okay, I won't invest in it. This company will be harvested over time and die. Remember, we are a $150 billion market capitalization company. Or we can invest, balancing level and duration of returns. So rather than boom splat, lots of returns for the short time and then collapse, we'll deliver sustained returns over a long period of time, but we will invest to keep this engine going. What do you think we should do? It was a rhetorical question because I was going to do what I was doing. I got my board on my side, and once my board was on my side, I was not going to change the strategy.
Okay. So taking forward from there, you are now Amazon board member. Does this ethical dilemma also apply to Amazon when, at least in people's mind, there might be perceived threat that Amazon, might lead to, exit of lot of small local stores? I'm not saying that is necessarily right, but people may perceive it as a threat. And we have talked about inequality. You mentioned about it and how we need to overcome it. How would you, answer them, or how would you tackle this issue in the context of Amazon?
Interesting question, and I give this a lot of thought. I look at COVID, and I don't know about India, but I'll tell you for the United States, none of us could have managed through COVID without Amazon. We couldn't have. Amazon was our life, especially for older people who were on lockdown. Strongly recommended not to leave. The only hope was Amazon, because Amazon delivered to the home. Second, for a busy family with kids, women in particular who are doing a second shift, third shift at home, Amazon gives you the gift of time. Instead of doing shopping in multiple places, it's one click. You can do it in the train or car, whatever, coming back. The stuff is home within a day. So in every industry, Vidya, when one industry rises, another industry sunsets and it remakes itself. The example is, I remember when I first came to the United States, we take pictures with a camera, with a film reel. We'll turn the film reel to a camera store. They would print all the photographs, give it in an envelope, which even today is all sticking and sitting in my cupboard. I don't even know where the film reels are. Remember those big machines they have? What happened to that business? When the digital cameras came by and all those businesses died, did we sit here worrying about why they're dying? Because we love the convenience. The same thing about Amazon. Without Amazon today, our life is going to be a lot more difficult. It's a technology-enabled company. Now, Amazon also lowers the barriers to entry for a lot of small guys to list on Amazon. And so I think that we have to look at Amazon more in terms of, thank God it's there, and how do we help the kiranas reconstitute into something else, rather than lament that somebody like Amazon, who we cannot live without, is going to impact the kiranas.
Right. Right, indeed. So, in fact, in maybe not in India, Amazon, but obviously in India also, we are living on, essentially the online services
Yeah.
during the lockdown. Yeah, so
Uh-huh.
that's a wonderful thing to have with technology. Women's issues are very close to you, and inequality is very close to you as an issue. You have been doing lots of, you have been giving donations to educational institutions for the same purpose, not only in US, but also in India. You have redone, your high school and your undergraduate college, uh, women's launch and science labs and so on. When there are so many things to take care of, and so many different projects that require funding, how do you decide? How do you make the decision that where your money should go or where your funding should go, so that it is
That's a
most
tough
effective?
question. We as a family give away a lot of money, but we only give it away where we know that the money will be properly spent,
Mhm.
where we have an emotional connection to the cause. Because we're not looking to write a check, we're looking to make a difference. And where we see a connection between the check we're writing and the cause, and where we think that if something is going off the rails, we can go in and intervene and say, stop it, get it back on the rails. I'll give you an example. We rebuilt the entire chemistry wing in Madras Christian College and the women's lounge. I remember going to the women's lounge when I was there between 71 and 74. When I went there 3 years ago, the condition of the lounge was exactly the same as it was then. The building had not been touched. It was horrible. The men's hostels were all great. They were all been refurbished, but the women's lounge was not touched. I was infuriated. So rebuilt it to be absolutely state of the art, better than the men's hostel. I have nothing against the men, don't get me wrong. I don't know why there should be a discrimination against women. So rebuilt it. The chemistry lab, some of the equipment from my time was still there. Broken burettes and pipettes and conical flasks. It was shocking. And so rebuilt the entire laboratory to be state of the art, made sure every student had safety goggles, coats. I mean, make science aspirational. But they allowed us to get the best, put in the best, make sure that it was going to be maintained, planted a garden around it so students could sit in the garden in a bench as opposed to, walking in the heat with clay soil. So you've got to think about where you are going to make an impact and how do you sustain the performance of that impact. That's how we've given money. It's not easy though. Everybody lines up to ask for money, but we are selected.
Yeah, okay. So select, and you have been recently selected to be on the panel for, the Equality Can't Wait Challenge of Melinda Gates. How do you think, taking the same issue about gender equality, how do you think, things have progressed that you have seen, and there is so much to do even more? What is the advice that you will give to our current batch of students, both boys and girls, so that they tackle this issue as they go ahead?
Yeah. Vidya, I'm going to say something which might surprise you. I would actually say when I was working in the early days, growing up, I had it easier than you guys have it. I'll tell you why. Some of you think, oh my gosh, you broke all glass ceilings, etc., etc. When I came into the workforce in IIM Calcutta, for example, I was the 11th batch. There were only 12 women in IIM Cal because the dorm had only 6 or 7 rooms, so 2 women to a room. So that decided how many women can come in. Whether it was to MCC, only the first row could be women. In chemistry, in IIM Cal, it was only 10 rooms or 12 rooms. So we were viewed as an oddity. We were viewed as these people are not competing with us, they're just there. And in fact, they were viewed as fun to have some women around. Later on, as the percentage of women have gone up, and these women are wicked smart, you've now become real competition. And you're beginning to see a lot more bias, a lot more elbowing out of the equation, and all of the other frictions, because in our generation, even the 10 or 12 in my class, in between the 2 years, 10th batch and 11th batch, or 11th batch and 12th batch, 50% went on the mommy track. Very few of us had the support system to stay working. So there were no societal fault lines. Now, more women wanting to work, wanting to have economic independence, wanting to have financial freedom, which I plead with you to have. Never give up your financial freedom. Never give up your economic independence. Total dependence on somebody else is wrong, just wrong. Because COVID has showed that when a woman in particular is completely dependent on the spouse, it's not a good thing. Just not a good thing. Be independent, please. In my case, I had all the help. I wasn't discriminated against. People wanted you to succeed because you're such a minority. Now you've begun to threaten. And so, I tell you, there's got to be the education of guys to say, hey, just treat them as equals. They could be your sister or your daughter or your mother, treat them as equals. And for women, also to respect men. So I think this is a time when both sexes have to treat each other with respect and with equality. It's a new generation, and social media and all that does not help you one bit. You see, in my time, there was no internet. There was hardly any computer. Communication was one to many. So when you sat down to watch the news or a movie, we all sat together as a family and watched it. It was one to many. There was a togetherness. Right now, it's many to one. So you're cocooning more and more. And then through social media, you become an amplification tool. You're one to many. So the funnel is working in weird ways. So that being the case, society is going through some ugly evolution. I can't do much about it. I don't like it. I can't relate to it. But the fact of the matter is, you have a tougher time than, you as women have a tougher time than I did growing up. I hate to tell you this.
Okay, so on that note, the next question follows, since you have said that our current students have a, current generation has a tougher time. What advice would you give yourself if you were now 25-year-old like that? You talked about your early days in, early days of management and so on. So they are now in their early days. So if you were them, how would you pursue your journey? And a question related to that, did you plan, did you have a goal? Did you have an ambition when you started off or you were completing MBA? Or, you just you just took the opportunities that came your way, or you really, planned it and worked towards a goal?
I mean, we can't plan because there's no role models. There was no women in the workforce. Think about it. When I graduated from college in IIM Cal, the women were a few doctors in Chennai, lots of nurses, teachers, secretaries. There were 0 women in any management roles. 0. 0. So what is a role model? There's nobody to look up to. All that you hope for is you do a good job, then you see what happens next. It was always just do a good job, just do a good job. Put your head down, just do a good job. And then you always had this voice from your home, typical South Indian Brahmin family. Just keep working hard, work harder, work harder. Even today, my mother was with me, says, work harder. It's only 24 hours, Mom, I can't work any harder. work harder, okay? So you have that inner drive, and when you come overseas, I did as an immigrant to the US, you have an immigrant fear. You have this fear that you might fail, you might bring shame on the family, so you're working even harder. So that's what motivated us to do that, not have a big plan. Had there been a big plan, I would have failed, because I'd have been so obsessing over the plan that reality would have failed. What would I do if I were today? Why were you today? You know, your world is more confusing and more distracting than my world was. You have to think about how you want to partition the world and decide what you want to engage in and what not. That's a decision you all have to make. And amongst your peer groups, you've got to get out of this keeping up with the Joneses to what do you all want to be? What contribution do you want to make to society? That's a conversation you all need to have. But make some choices or decisions. Do you want to have a family? Do you want to get married? Just know that's a full-time job. Do you want to also have a career and move ahead? No, that's a full-time job. By virtue of your birth, just know that that's a full-time job, taking care of parents or parents-in-law, whichever way you have it. All of these are full-time jobs. So you can either say, man, I got to do 4 jobs. Or you can say, how do I co-opt all of them to help me do the job better? I had my mother, my in-laws, all helping me take care of my kids. So I lived in a multi-generational family with intergenerational responsibility. They helped. You all have to decide how you want to use the family, how you want to respect them, love them, but co-opt them in your career. How do you want to balance all of these things between home and work and childcare? How do you want to balance all of this stuff? But think before you do something. Don't just jump into something and then blame society or blame companies. It's your decision. You have to make your life.
Right. So in that answer somewhere you also mentioned about, your fears and anxieties, and there would have been lots of different kinds of anxieties and fears on personal front, on, business front. When as a leader and as a CEO, you're taking bold decisions at, at your workplace, how do you manage to keep an image of, confident image and a public image? Which you obviously have to hide whatever is the fear and anxieties you are feeling about the, your decisions that you're taken, which you might not be even sure about at that point.
Yeah, Vidya, the key thing is when you're in a boardroom or in forums where a lot of people, when I was in Boston consulting, at that time, hardly any women in consulting. So I'd go to Wisconsin or something to a client, there'd be 50 men in the room and myself. But I didn't want them to look at me as a woman. I wanted them to look at me as a consultant with good ideas, has done analysis. So at every point in time, I tried my best never to draw attention to myself, the way I dressed, the way I wore my hair, the way I put on jewelry was all understated, because I said, first of all, I got to establish the credentials that I am a damn good professional. Okay, later on, if you notice I'm a woman tough, it's your problem. But I want to make sure the credentials that I am an outstanding consultant is what you focus on. Sometimes today that comes the other way, and I don't like it. But again, I'm a different generation. Don't forget, I'm a boomer. You guys are a different generation. So don't take what I'm saying and say, oh God, she told us that we don't dress okay. I'm not saying that. I'm just giving you an old person's perspective of all of you. And so when you focus on the job, and as Bala said, I always say, put your hand up for the toughest assignments. When you focus on a job, focus on delivering an outstanding result, all of a sudden people view you as a needle mover in the company, as opposed to, somebody who's just demanding things because of their sex, demanding things because of their background or whatever, not because their work speaks for themselves.
Right. So, so moving ahead, beyond gender related issues, your best decision, I suppose, in your corporate career would have been, when you decided to take PepsiCo or the healthier way. What would be your worst decision that you have made? And
best decision I made?
No, best decision I suppose would have been the decision you made with PepsiCo, taking the company, diversify towards a healthier portfolio of food products. But what would be your worst decision you consider as a worst decision that, if at all,
The worst decision.
which backfired, and then how did you face it?
You know, I don't know about worst decision. The times you make a decision and it fails.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. Not
And
worst, maybe, yeah. Something
that's
which went
inevitable.
wrong.
It happens
Yeah,
all the time to everybody. You do make decisions. You're paid as a leader to make decisions, not to just procrastinate. So when you make decisions, there are times when things don't go your way because circumstances changed, your implementation wasn't up to snuff, the people around you let you down. All of these things are factors. You know, when you run huge companies, so many pieces have to come together. When things fail, you have a couple of three choices. First, you first go to school on the failure and ask yourself, was it an implementation failure where you can fix it fast? Or was the core program itself at fault? And if there was an implementation failure, is it because I didn't teach them how to implement, or is it because they're fighting the implementation? And you've really got to do sort of a root cause analysis as to what caused the issue. If the decision itself was flawed and the circumstances had changed, then you can come out and say, hey, circumstances have changed. But if it's an implementation issue, go to school, really understand the root cause of what caused the problem, and go address those things on a micro basis, each of those issues. And if after a while you believe, especially the cost of failure is low, if you believe you have to pull the plug on this, pull it and start again. But you have to decide if the cost of failure is high, you'll be in trouble if you keep doing this. If the cost of failure is low, you can't do it.
Right. Yeah. So in your corporate journey, as you mentioned, when you started off, there were not many, role models. But as you move ahead, or as you think about today, who would you, if you were to choose, say, two corporate leaders that our students should follow on Twitter, apart from you, of course, who would you name as two corporate leaders that they should follow, and what are the qualities in them which you think are, underrated as a leader?
Again, there are many, many corporate leaders in India and around the world you should be following. There isn't one person that you should be following. You should be drawing the best from multiple people. My only request is don't follow the one person who's making the most money, because that's a natural inclination to say, this person's a billionaire, I want to be a billionaire too, so this is my icon. Think about somebody who is doing things the right way, which has a positive impact on society. Somebody who's truly worried about the future course of society based on their business. And see if they're doing everything the right way, treating their people right, treating their environment right. Ask those questions. Is this a company that, if I were to tell people I'm working for company X, would they say, wow, that's a great company? That's a company that really makes a difference. Or would they say, oh, I'm sure you're making a lot of money? Of course, there's some sexiness for saying you make a lot of money, but at night, you won't sleep so well. At least I hope so. I hope you don't sleep well just making money. I hope you sleep well saying, I made a difference today.
Right. So
with that, I have to call it quits because I have to get ready for my next one.
Sure. So last question to end it on a lighter note. How long did you sleep last night? Because you're known to be a very, very hard worker, and used to sleep only 4-5 hours for years and years. Are you getting like slightly more sleep now?
I'm one of those 1% of genetic malfunctions in the world that has a sleep abnormality. But that's okay. That's how I've been all my life. I'm okay.
Yeah.
All my life.
Yeah.
So
thanks a lot.
Thank you all. Thank you. Bala, happy birthday again to you. And thank you for having me.
That video?
No, sir, I think she has to go in a hurry, so we'll let the video go. I'll just pass this on quickly to the Dean to say out the vote of thanks, and then we can let Ms. Nooyi go on her way.
Yeah. Thank you, Pratima.
Thank you, Indra, so much. Really appreciate what you are doing and what you have done. And also, I still remember that Yale Great Lakes Conference in Tinagar. You just walked, and that is the spirit that we like, and I'm positive both boys and girls will emulate a lot from your purpose and performance.
Yeah.
It's a
Thank you.
beautiful way of getting things done in these days.
Thank you.
Thank you very much on behalf of the entire Great Lakes. God bless.
Thank you.
And
Suresh, it's all yours.
yeah, quickly, and Ms. Nooyi, thanks once again for sparing the time to share all your thoughts with our students. As a fellow IIM Calcutta, 22nd batcher, it's truly wonderful to have you here to share your perspectives, and I'm delighted to have been able to finally interact with you here. And all I can say is that I think your message of performance with a purpose, and particularly with the emphasis on purpose, resonated completely. I'm sure it resonated with all our students. It certainly resonated with me personally in terms of how I think of myself and how what I want to accomplish here at Great Lakes. And so I know you are short of time, so I don't want to spend any more time talking or waxing eloquent about anything. But thank you very, very much for sharing your thoughts, and I'm sure all our students are going to be truly inspired by everything that you said and take those words to heart. Thank you.
Thank you, Suresh, and thank you all. Thank you for this wonderful time together, and good luck to everybody.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Very much, Indra. All the best.
Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.